Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 599. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about baobabs and zebu, chameleons and constrictors, and of course, lemurs as we go to Madagascar.
I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Without further ado, let's talk about Madagascar. I'd like to welcome to the show Corinne Vale from reflectionsenroute.com, who has come to talk to us about Madagascar. Corinne, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Happy to be here.
So Madagascar is not an easy place to go to, so I'm guessing you didn't get there accidentally. What led you to Madagascar?
We love to do anything outdoors, safari, wildlife related. And what better wildlife safari place to go than Madagascar?
So you're saying you went for the lemurs.
We went for the lemurs and the chameleon.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and then after we got there, we found out they have this fantastic kind of cattle called zebu. Now they're my favorite.
Okay, we'll talk more about that. Why should someone else go to Madagascar?
There is no place like it on Earth. It truly is this island out in the middle of the ocean where things evolved differently, and it is stunning.
Excellent. And what kind of itinerary do you recommend for somebody going to Madagascar?
It really depends on the travel they want to do. Basically, It's a full-on adventure or luxury, maybe a little bit of both. We didn't really do the luxury, so I can't talk too much about that, just a little bit of luxury. But we did do full-on adventure and hiking and rainforests and communing with lemurs and holding snakes galore. It was fun.
Excellent. And where did you start, and what did you do first?
We started in the capital city of, and I won't say this correctly, sorry, Anantnariv. It's a very long name, and I couldn't even recognize it when they announced it on the airplane to load. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I think that's us. but they call it Tana for short. So Tana. And we only stayed there one night. We immediately got picked up by our driver and headed out into the bush, as they would say, up north to see the Avenue of the Baobabs in our first national park.
Okay, and you see the Avenue of the Baobabs, and that is something that I think a lot of people know what you're talking about, but what is a baobab?
A baobab is a beautiful tree that is purportedly looks like it's upside down because it has a has a wide trunk. It's just a very unique looking tree that is absolutely gorgeous. And I'd like to take photos, so that was high on my list of things to do. Thus, I did it first.
Okay. You see the Avenue of the, and I'm pronouncing this differently than you are.
Well, I say baobabs, but
Okay.
don't just because I pronounce it that way doesn't by any stretch of the imagination make it correct.
I won't swear to my pronunciation. I have not been there before.
They speak Malagasy and French in Madagascar, and both were pretty unintelligible once they got going. So who knows what the correct pronunciation is?
See, I only know one phrase in Malagasy, so that's not going to help me here. All I know is Sidishu ni Mangataka.
Which means what? I don't know
It
that
never
one.
hurts to ask.
Oh, that's a good phrase to know.
And I should say I learned that from the Maryland Chords, who we had on the show way back in episode 141, I think, which is the other show we did on Madagascar. So if you're interested in more information, you can also go back way back in the archives and find that one. But it had been a long time, so we wanted to do this over again. So you went to the national park there, and what's the national park again?
Well, the Avenue of the Baobabs isn't really in the park, but
Okay.
right after that, we went to Corinne National Park, where we saw our first lemurs.
Okay, so straight to the trees, straight to the lemurs.
That's what our goal was, yeah.
Okay, one of the smaller primates in the world.
Well, they used to have a lemur that's extinct now that was over 300 pounds and as large as a human.
Oh my, I didn't know that.
But they don't have those anymore. The largest one we saw, the largest lemur they have is called the Indri. That lemur is very special to the Malagasy people. They have a legend. They also call it Kutu Baba, and Baba in a lot of
Father.
languages means father. That's right. So Kutu Baba means that Kutu got lost in the forest when he was a toddler, and who took care of them, but the Indri, and therefore they have a special place in the Malagasy heart. And they are quite tall. I would say they would come up. I'm 5'3", and definitely if they were stretched out, they would give it me a run for my money.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I mean, probably not quite 5 foot, but they look pretty long and lanky.
Interesting. I think most of the lemurs I have seen have been on the smaller side. So interesting. And was that the type you were seeing at that park?
No, we didn't see them until a few parks later because we did a 15-day trip around Madagascar. And it was driving, walking in very hot, humid, drenching national parks, and sleeping in pretty nice hotels. There's nothing between nice, almost luxury, to not nice, really. So we stayed in the nice ones.
And then you did this as an organized tour?
No, Jim and I like to do road trips. We road trip all over the world, and he doesn't mind driving really anywhere. He'll tell you the only places he wouldn't drive would be Egypt and India.
Those are the two places I thought of. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, everything else is fair game. And we actually tried to hire a car and have him drive in Madagascar, but it's just too difficult.
Okay.
Most of the rental car agencies would only rent to you if you rented a driver as well.
Okay.
Therefore, that's what we did. And we completely made up our own itinerary. He did put in some suggestions, of course, but we basically made our own itinerary. It was just the driver, Jim and I, in the car, and made a good run for it.
Okay. So you went to the first national park there. You saw lemurs. And what type of lemur are you seeing here?
The first national park, and this is probably something that I might add, it was hotter than blazes in Madagascar.
What time of year did you go?
We went in December, which is their summer, and it's also the rainy season. It's already a tropical island. So the rainy season in the middle of summer, hot and humid are understatements. I was not prepared for the heat and humidity. And we were hiking through Corinne National Park for about 2 hours. And by the way, there's no glamour involved in this. You are drenched from the moment you get out of the car, basically.
Sure.
And so 2 hours, I'm thinking, wow, I'm doing pretty good. It's kind of flat. It's easy. Oh, boom. I raised my camera. I had a 400 millimeter lens on my camera, and I went to raise it. And I was reeling from dizziness. And I thought, I don't think I could do this anymore. So I sit down on the rainforest floor right next to, by the way, a boa constrictor that we'd just seen. And I didn't even care because I was feeling that dizzy. And so I sat down on the rainforest floor, and another guy comes running up. There's lemurs over here. And he says to me, do you want to come? I said, no. At that point, we had met up with a couple of other groups. So he took the other groups over to the other lemurs, which happened to be the brown common lemur, which we saw many times later. So I made the right choice.
Okay.
And the lemurs we were sitting with were the Pacifica lemur, right? So they were so soulful, and they just sat there with me. And in fact, I was sitting on the rainforest floor, and they came down out of the trees and literally sat with me for 30 minutes. And there's this little one who was probably about maybe 3.5, 4 feet away from me. He's looking at me, and he's kind of slowly closing his eyes as if to say, just calm down, lady. Just relax. You're going to be okay. I'll sit here with you. And they did.
Now, in retrospect, would you have traveled at a different time of year?
Well, we ended up loving the rainy season because of the colors. It was just so vibrant and green, and they have these red clay houses, and the contrast of the green rice fields and the red clay. I mean, it was just really, really beautiful. And if you went in the summer, all of that turns brown.
Sure.
So you got to take the good with the bad. So what I'm saying is I put up the sweat and drenching and that dizziness. It was the only time I got dizzy. I wasn't acclimated, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was well worth going that time. It really wasn't crowded because it's not the most popular time, but we enjoyed it. I think we picked it okay. We're happy with our choice.
Okay. Anything else you want to talk about the national park before we move to your next stop?
Well, no. That, though, Moldova and that whole area up by our very first stop was where we were the only time on the water. And they do have gorgeous beaches and beautiful fishing boats in Madagascar. But that's not why we went. And quite frankly, we didn't have time to do that. So even though we went for 15 days, and we basically chose to do the national park to national park to national park route, I think a lot of people would really want to spend some time on the beaches as well.
Okay.
Maybe I'll go back someday to do that because it does sound pretty awesome.
Now, you started in the north then.
Antananarivo, or Tana, is pretty much in the center of the island.
Okay.
So then we went south a little bit, and we headed over to the east.
Okay.
And Moldova is on the eastern part, right on the Mozambique Channel.
Okay. Got it. All right. I was had you at the wrong place.
Yeah, and here's one of the things that we found out a little bit before we left because we were trying to rent a car. But we were not prepared for the distances and the length of time that you would be in a car. Because the roads are narrow, potholes, everything is on the roads, but from cows to children to...
So you looked at the map and it said like 200 miles and you thought, okay, so that's 4 hours.
Yeah. And no. I think 150 kilometers works out to about 6 hours.
Okay.
So that's at least double what you would normally expect, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, at least double. But I think we had 3 full days of just driving at different times during our tour. So that's a lot. And it was pretty rough.
Rough from a bone jarring kind of rough too, or just rough from a car sickness kind of point of view?
More bone jarring.
Okay.
We didn't get car sick, but sometimes the trucks would get in your way. There was a truck in front of us. I've never seen this happen before in my life. Had a double axle. Both axles were split in two.
Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine? And it's just there in the middle of the road. I mean, we saw some crazy stuff. So we're kind of glad we didn't drive there after all.
Okay.
It was a lot of fun. Again, we weren't quite prepared for the length of the days, but that's okay. It ended up being okay. Actually, what we did for the entire 15 days is from that national park, we went to the center of the country, went to Ranamafana to a national park there. From there, we went to another national park called Isalo. And all along the way, we were staying at, you've been to Africa with the beautiful safari lodges, right? It was very similar to that. I would imagine it's on a very African model of touring. So you would stay in a very, very nice safari lodge at each place that we went. And there's no restaurants. I mean, they have hotels and little restaurants, but most of the restaurants were not really recommended to us because the water is not up to par. And in fact, we almost canceled our trip because there was a bubonic plague scare.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's not something you're looking for in a vacation.
And so now I figured I'd come back and on my blog, I would write, my title would be, I Survived the Bubonic Plague. That's worth something, right? Yeah, no, the bubonic plague apparently happens there every year. But this was an especially bad year. That's the only time I've ever thought about canceling a trip. The water and some of the health concerns are a little bit daunting, I think. But it didn't turn out bad at all, and everybody I met was healthy, and that was all fine. They were taking temperatures.
Yeah, no, I've seen that before when SARS was around. You couldn't fly out of China without them taking your temperature.
Yes, except they only did that in the airport.
Yep.
They took your temperature at the ATM machines downtown.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes. Now, I've never seen that before.
No, I haven't seen that either.
So anyway, that was a little daunting, but everybody was healthy. Yeah. So that's what we did. We drove, we stopped, we saw lemurs, we hiked.
Let's do that in a little more detail then. So at Corinne Vale National Park was the first one you were at?
That was the first we went to, yes.
Anything else you wanted to say about that one in terms of the lodging, for instance? Nice African-style lodge.
It was a stunning lodge. Well, here's the other thing. I would say the lodges were very African, yes, in a lot of ways. But that was really the only thing that reminded me of Africa.
Okay.
Everything else reminded me of Asia.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting place, I gotta say.
Reminded you of Asia in what way?
The original people that came to Madagascar were from Borneo, Malaysia, and Indonesia,
I didn't know that.
Asia. Yeah, and what they did is, of course, they brought their culture with them, where they eat rice 3 meals a day. And they have changed the landscape, which is gorgeous, but a little sad, of course, from this beautiful tropical forested island to rice paddy after rice paddy after rice paddy. Terraced and gorgeous, but a completely introduced plant. So that's a little bit different. And, of course, the people, ethnicity-wise, they have about a third Chinese, a third Asian, Malaysian and Indonesian Asian, and then a third African. So really, even the look of the people was less African than I expected.
Interesting.
But the lodges were very African. They had the pool and the indoor-outdoor eating area with a bar and beautiful little, your own little cabins that you could go to. Yeah, I mean, it was gorgeous.
Okay.
The one we stayed at was right on the beach.
Nice. So then you went to Ranamafana?
Ranamafana.
Okay.
Exactly. Which means, I believe, white water because there's a waterfall there.
Okay.
And what did we see there? Well, we averaged at least a snake a day. One day we saw 5 snakes.
Venomous snakes or boas or what?
No, that's an interesting part of Madagascar. A good reason to go there. Unlike Australia, there's nothing dangerous. Nothing.
Interesting, except for the roads.
And the water.
Okay. And the bubonic plague, but okay.
And just the bubonic plague, that's right. But the animals are all non-venomous. So they have huge spiders, many, many, many different species of spiders, lizards, chameleons, and all kinds of lizards. And they even have crocodiles. Now, they're a little dangerous, but they don't have very many left. And they're sort of isolated. And, of course, the lemurs. And most of the animals are very Well, they're not venomous. They're not going to hurt you.
And you mentioned chameleons before. Are we talking large chameleons or the usual size that I'm familiar with, the size of your hand, maybe?
Oh, no, these were large.
Okay.
And all different colors, stunning colors. The Parsons chameleon was my favorite. We came across him in Ranamarfana, as a matter of fact. And I don't know how they saw this chameleon way up at the top of the tree, but he was up there and he was climbing down, and he was a brilliant, almost a spring leaf green. And he had blue and pink, and it was just amazing. So every chameleon that we saw plenty, had yellows and pinks and reds. I just couldn't believe the colors. It was amazing. And I loved them. They're pretty cool.
Now, the smart chameleon you're not supposed to see at all, right?
Yes, and you see that iconic, the chameleon walking across the street thing,
Sure.
Commercial or whatever. Oh yeah, we saw that too. Scared me to death because those people do not slow down for anything. So one of the things, of course, all the guides do is they show you the chameleon hunting. So they always have a cricket in their pocket.
Okay.
Just magically a cricket appears. And they'll hold it out between their two fingers. And you've seen it on National Geographic where the tongue just unfurls really slowly. And then all of a sudden it's back in its mouth and they're munching on the cricket. And we did see that. But the very first time that we saw that, we called the guide to us. He didn't even see the chameleon. And the chameleon was hunting. We saw it kill 2 crickets, and the guide was just in shock. He's like, wow. He didn't even have to fake it for us. So that was cool.
Very cool. So chameleons in Ranamafana, and what else?
Other types of lemurs. I think we saw altogether about 8 types of lemurs.
Okay.
I cannot remember all of the species of lemurs at this point, but I believe we saw gray bamboo lemurs. We saw the Sifakan lemurs. We saw the lemurs that are in Madagascar movie. We saw so many different types of lemurs. It was pretty cool. And they're all completely different.
And when you say the movie, you mean the movie Madagascar?
Yeah, the cartoon.
So you're saying the real reason you went to Madagascar was because of the movie?
No.
Some hesitation.
No, actually, I hadn't even seen the movie before we went.
Okay.
I don't have little children anymore. I was just trying to remember what kind of lemur that was because all of my students knew about lemurs before I went. And they're ring-tailed lemurs. I'm like, well, how do they know that? But that's because it was in the movie.
Yep.
And we did see ring-tailed lemurs. Yeah, so that was fun. They're very bouncy. All the lemurs are pretty bouncy, but some are more energetic than others. Like the brown common and the ringtail were probably the most active. Now the ringtail, what was really interesting about them, and we saw them at a private little park not too far from Andesibe, and we're walking on the path. And here we come into this little clearing with a full group of ring-tailed babies and young lemur with only a couple of older lemurs. It was a nursery or a school. And they played around and they would jump and they'd play hide and seek with you. And for about 15 minutes, they just romped all over the place. It was pretty fascinating. It was just like they were being taken care of, and then it was probably time to go take a nap.
Okay. Well, I want to continue on your itinerary. Do we want to talk about anything else at Ranamafana?
Ranamafana. Yeah, Ranamafana is one of the places where they'll take you out and do a night walk.
Okay.
We did a night walk there, and we saw a couple of small chameleons, the smallest chameleon that they have, which is only about, well, it's not the smallest, I don't think, but it's the smallest in that area, and it was about 3 inches long.
Okay.
And we saw some frogs and snakes. You see snakes everywhere. And we saw the mouse lemur, which is a nighttime lemur. It was the only nighttime lemur we saw that was really small with the big bulby eyes, kind of like a bush baby.
Right.
They were very cute. Came to eat a banana. Yeah, but that's all. I mean, that's all we did there.
Okay. And then where was your next stop?
Along the way, as people who are driving you tend to do, we did stop at a lot of little handicraft places. Madagascar is known for its handicrafts. And Route 7, National Route 7, is an especially beautiful road. And they have handicraft things all the way along the roads.
And this is the biggest highway in the country.
I think it is the biggest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty large, and it's the one that's the most traveled for sure. And there's plenty of trucks on it. But while we were on the road, we saw things like they were hand-making little trucks and cars out of wood.
Okay.
They had religious statues made out of plaster. They grow physalis there. Do you know what physalis is?
I do not know what thistleus is.
Well, if you've ever had dinner in Germany, where I live, they have these little orange fruits with these gray-green leaves that are beautiful garnishes. And they put them on many of the dinner plate, like here and in France. And that's a physalis fruit. Well, they're grown in Madagascar.
Is it thistleus TH or with an F? I can't.
With an F.
Okay.
I believe it's Fisilis. Physalis. I know. Learn something new every time you travel, right?
Sure.
So at this one village where they have the physalis would normally grow in that region, they actually boil it down and they make essence of physalis. So they make perfume even out of it. So I found that pretty interesting as well. So that was one of the handicrafts. There was Benny. So that was a nice little distraction as we were going on to our next national park.
Apparently it's with a PH. At least in English. Physalis. Physalis.
Oh, that could be. I think I probably looked it up.
Ground cherry. No, I'm not. Oh, I do recognize that. Okay, with the yellow. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
It's like I said, in Europe especially.
Yeah, yep.
I mean, you often see it as a garnish on your plate.
Yep, I have seen it now that I scroll down here.
So then it was Christmas Eve, and we went to Isalo National Park.
Mm-hmm.
Now remember, Madagascar, at first it was a monarchy way back when, about the late 1800s. And then the French came in, and they were a French colony up until 1960. So the French influence there is very, very strong.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are at this luxury safari lodge in Isalo National Park. And it's Christmas Eve, so we're going to have Père Noël there, and we're going to have this huge French multi-course dinner. It was very interesting. Did you know, this is one thing I didn't know for sure before I left, that there is foie gras made in Madagascar?
And exported to France or just consumed locally?
I don't know if it's exported anywhere, but they sure do love it. And all the restaurants, there was even a whole town devoted to foie gras where they make it that we went to. During this Christmas dinner that we had there, I think they had foie gras on the menu 3 different times. It's very popular.
Okay.
It was very interesting. And it was such a mix of that African feeling, and you're out in the jungle, and there's all kinds. I mean, there was a snake right on our porch right as we were arriving that day. So you're very much in the jungle, and here you are having the whole French Christmas evening. It was just very discombobulating almost. It was fun. But that was interesting, and that was a gorgeous, gorgeous area. That was one of my favorite areas, probably, was Isalo. The hike that we went on, they go up the mountain, and there's little pools to sit in and swim in, and then there's waterfalls. And, of course, on top of so it was a different kind of terrain as some of the other ones. And then, of course, you had your lemurs to entertain you as well.
Okay.
I don't think we went to too many more national parks, but we ended up, one of our last places we went was not too far outside as we're heading back towards Tana to end our trip.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Park Voyema and Lemur Island. In that lodge, a very luxurious lodge there as well, they took a river and they have this little island where they have 8 different types of lemur right there. They take you across a very tiny channel in a rowboat. I mean, it took 3 minutes. And you get off, and then they'll feed the lemurs, and then you get pictures with the lemurs. And it's someplace I think that everybody would want to go, and especially if you were traveling with children. I would make sure it was my last stop, just like we had it scheduled, because if you went there first, your children would never be happy again.
Okay.
It was really nice. They did it well. The Libras were outside. There's no cages or anything like that, but they were on the island. They weren't able to get off the island. So in a way, they're sort of in captivity, but not. It was well done.
Okay.
And then not far from there, too, is they had a reptile park. So even though Jim and I had seen chameleon after spider, snake. I mean, I held 3 different snakes during the time that I was there, wild. I don't mind snakes. Spiders, I didn't want to hold those. They have a reptile park, and as you go through the reptile park, it was really nice because they told you all the things about the animal itself, as well as you could hold it or take pictures or see it much closer up if you wanted pictures and things like that. Both those 2 things I think are must-sees in Madagascar.
Mm-hmm.
And what's nice about them is they're only about a couple hours out of Tana. So you don't even really have to take those huge, long treks to do that if you're in Tana. The other way you can get around, though, is to go on the Air Madagascar hops across the island.
Okay.
We did know people who had tried that, but the problem is they cancel them pretty frequently. So if you're on a time crunch,
Okay.
it's hard to do that. But if you don't do it, then you're limited to where you can go because it takes so long. So it's one of those things you got to make a choice about.
Okay. What insights did you get into the Malagasy people? You were spending a day with a driver for 14 days, for instance, so you had a chance to have some interactions.
We did. And I have to say that was a bonus of having a driver.
Mm-hmm.
Because usually we're out there on our own and we're making these observations and we're inferring things that may or may not be accurate because
Sure.
no one really tells you.
We always do that. I don't know that we know we always do that, but yeah.
I mean, it's just that's the way it is. And so by going with a driver, there was a couple things that were really nice about it. First of all, every brochure, every hotel, everyone tells you do not go out at night by yourself.
Oh, okay.
So obviously you should not go out at night by yourself. But that also just sort of says that there is maybe this underlying danger, whether it just might be from being robbed or I don't know if you're in personal danger or not. But one of the things our driver said was we were going through a couple of places. I would suggest you roll up your window halfway and please wrap your camera strap around your wrist. No, wrap it around again. So he was really taking care of us, which, yes, you could argue that's his job, but he did it in a very subtle, suggesting way where he didn't really want you to get upset. And I don't think the people were dangerous, but they were kind of grabby.
Uh-huh.
That was nice. He took care of us that way. And the other thing was the insights that you get from being there. So I didn't learn the phrase you learned, but I did learn a few words of Malagasy. And I learned it well enough that as we were passing on the road, on the trail, sometimes I could tell if we were going to run into animals or not. And the guides were just amazed that I could pick up this one word and figure out what was going on. But that's because they didn't know I've lived all over the world and spoken many languages. So he would teach me a little bit more Malagasy every day. So that was kind of nice. And he wasn't teaching me textbook, if there is such a thing, Malagasy. He was teaching me, this is how we say this, and very conversational. Like one thing they say is mamae. Mamae is hot. So it was very hot, as I told you.
Uh-huh.
And mamae bay is very, very hot. Well, mamae bay also means that it's a hard life because their life is so hot and tedious that if you... So it's just fair. So those are things that you don't get from a textbook. You know, you have to sort of learn that. So I thought that was a bonus by having a driver and him teaching me a little bit about the language and, of course, the customs as well. And that wasn't his role. His role was to drive. We didn't hire him as a guide in any way, shape, or form. And he made that abundantly clear that he was not a guide. And basically his plan was to drive us, drop us. But he did much more than that. And I think everyone we ran into was super friendly, super helpful. I love traveling, and I was going to say in Asia, but I guess it's technically Africa. But it really feels Asian to me. And I love traveling places where they want to have their picture taken. They want to smile at you. They want to catch your eye. They want to have a little of an interaction. They probably don't want to get into a large conversation with you because they don't feel adequate, and I certainly am not adequate to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But they want to still connect with you in some way. And I love that because I live in Europe, and as much as I love Europe very, very much, it's just not the same. I'm just like anybody else living here, and no one really wants to connect with me that way.
Uh-huh.
Oh, we are moving to Japan, though, so maybe it'll change.
Okay. Any other things we want to talk about in terms of people should know this before they go to Madagascar, or before I get to some of my wrap-up questions?
I think really everyone needs to check the health.
Okay.
Because, like I said, the bubonic plague was a little bit scary. And on top of that, they have malaria, so you have to probably get malaria pills.
Okay.
And we did see plenty of mosquitoes, and we did get bit a couple of times, and we were fine. So.
And we were using a prophylactic? You're using?
We were both on malarials, yeah. We were on different ones.
Okay.
I was on Malarone. He was on...
Larium. Yeah, Larium that gives you potentially vivid dreams.
Yeah. And it's kind of hard to sleep if you're not used to it. So I didn't take that one. So I think that's really important. I also think that hot weather, but it's a very conservative society in a lot of ways.
Yeah, this is not a shorts and tank top sort of place.
You can do that, but you have to do it tastefully. You know, maybe have a shirt over your tank top, and maybe have capris instead of short shorts.
Okay.
And it's hot and sweaty, so...
Plan on washing things.
Oh, yes. Plan on washing things. I think we washed every single night we were there. We had to.
Yep. You take off your shirt, you see the salt stain from where you've sweat so much. Yeah.
Crazy. It's just crazy. So it's a very poor country. Very, very, very poor country. So we didn't, of course, have any Malagasy money prior to getting there. And we got there and went straight to an ATM and got out a pile of money, literally a pile of money. And it lasted all of, 18 hours before that pile of money was gone, because it's a pile of money, but it's not worth anything. So everything that you buy, you're giving them a pile of money. So you have to be very careful about the way the money, it's not that it's difficult, it's just that it's so much or so little for so much, however you want to look at that. Such a big pile of money, and it's really not worth anything. So it seems like you have a lot, and you really don't.
Well, what I like to do with that is, before you head to the ATM machine, and probably before you get on the plane when you're not so jet lagged, have some idea of what the exchange rate is, because that's going to... So you don't do what I did. One of my more recent trips, I think I got money out of the machine and then went, wait, I just got like $10.
Right.
Did the math and went, oh, what was I thinking? Had to do the math again and, got out a reasonable amount of money. And then also try and get an understanding of which bill is my 20. Which bill is the equivalent of
$20.
Of $20. Because we're so used to, you get $20 out and you know how much you could buy with that. Sometimes it's the 20 and sometimes it's the 5 and sometimes it's the 100,000, right? Just depending on which currency you're playing with. And so just having that kind of mental image that that's my 20 kind of grounds me then into how much should I expect to pay for things and how much money do I need for how many days and things like that.
And there's not very many ATMs.
Yep.
And you could tell which ones worked and which ones didn't, because the ones that worked had the hour-long line standing outside of it.
Literally an hour-long line?
Literally. In the hot 41 degrees
Celsius.
Sure,
of course. Ooh.
Temperature. So, the money thing is something that has to be planned out, especially more than, I would say, I travel pretty all over the place, and I think I haven't had that much trouble with money. Not that I had trouble, but I had to think about it more than I have in a long time. That means it's a little bit difficult.
Yeah, well, and for our Fahrenheit thinking listeners, when she said 41, just so you know, that's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So we were talking quite warm.
I was always around 40 degrees or 100, 105 degrees, and the humidity was 85 to 95%. It was brutal.
Okay. And then anything you would change in the itinerary you did now that you have been there?
I think that I would suggest people try to fly to Moldova. I would never take that Moldova. I wouldn't take that out of there. It was my favorite part of the trip because it had the baobabs and the national park, and it has beaches there. It really has it all. You have to go there.
But the drive was a bit.
Luckily, luckily we did it early in the trip, so we
Yep.
weren't tired yet. But we still had other days that by the time we finished our third full day of heat and driving, we were a little bit travel weary, I have to say. Yeah, but it was still beautiful.
Okay.
Everything about it was beautiful. And driving was amazing because, of course, when you drive, you get to see
Yeah.
everything, the animals and the people. And yeah, it's just wonderful.
Well, as we go to wrap this up then, you're standing in the prettiest spot you saw in Madagascar. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
That's the sunset of the Avenue of the Baobabs.
Okay.
Hands down. One of the most stunning landscapes I've seen in a long time. Beautiful. Just amazing. I mean, that's one of the things they're famous for. So they have it well set up and they have tour groups around. And even though I think that was probably the place we saw the most tourists the whole time that we were there. And even then, I don't think there was, I don't know, maybe 50 people. I know, right? That's hardly anything. And yet, of course, one of those people is going to get in your shot if you're not careful.
Well, of course.
Of course. So what they do is they get you out there and you wander around and then the sun sets through the baobabs. And I overheard this one French guide. She was telling her group, stand right here and this is the perfect place to take a photo. And she was right. She's done it every day for the last, who knows how many years. It was just really wonderful. It was gorgeous. That's where I would say is number one spot.
One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Madagascar.
I don't know if this counts, but every time you eat, you have grit. So we called that the Africa part.
Okay.
There's the Africa because
Sure.
I don't know.
Like ugali, basically.
Yeah. You just always get a little bit of grit in your food. You have to
grit.
expect that.
Oh, I thought you had grits.
Grit.
Oh.
No. Grit. Like
a little dirt.
It's like, oh, there it is. There's the Africa.
Okay.
Okay, now we can finish our meal. It's in every single meal, though.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would say that. I think the other thing that for me is iconically Madagascar was the zebu, as I mentioned first thing. The zebu is their cattle, and they have a hump on their back.
Yeah.
And they use them for everything from pulling carts to plowing the fields to eating. We had zebu almost every day. It was delicious. So it was cute, soulful, had these beautiful horns, and it tasted good. I mean, that's a pretty good animal right there.
One time you felt closest to home. This is very, very familiar. And one time you felt furthest from home. This is very, very different.
I guess the only place Jim and we've been married 33 years, and the only place we've lived together in the States is Alaska for 8 years. And when you're in Alaska, you're sort of out doing this rough driving and
Sure. Mm-hmm.
It's tough. It's adventurous. Not hot, though.
No.
So one time we were sort of fording a river as we were going on this major road. Here's this river, but that had the rainy season. And so the pothole river took over the whole road and we were going down and into it. And I said, hey, you needed a snorkel. We would have had a snorkel in Alaska. So that was probably the closest to home. Nothing else was very homey, except for I live in Europe and we love French food. And there was tons of French food in Tana. They have a lot of really good restaurants. I was surprised at the food scene. It was delicious.
Okay.
So I guess there's that too.
I've seen Anthony Bourdain's episode on Madagascar, so I'm not as surprised.
Really?
Yep.
Especially when you're there. It's such a dichotomous thing because it's a poor country.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And people are walking around in either plastic shoes or barefoot. And yet they have these French restaurants. I mean, it doesn't really fit. But anyway, so that was pretty cool. When did I feel the most out of my comfort zone?
Yep.
Or not really. I didn't really feel too out of my comfort zone. We love to go into kitchens as much as possible, speaking of food. And we were in this little restaurant, and the chef invited us back into the kitchen. And it's such a poor country that there wasn't any electricity. There wasn't any running water in this kitchen. And they were still cooking over charcoal fires. So going back and seeing that, I mean, it kind of really slams home how poor the country is. That the restaurant, this guy's in this beautiful white chef's coat with a Madagascar pin on it. He looks sharp, and he takes us back, and he has to send somebody out to get the water.
Yeah.
That tells you something. So I would say that was probably when it kind of hit home.
Excellent. And last question. If you had to summarize Madagascar in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
I would say African, Asian, luxury adventure. I don't know. I really don't know.
Okay, but next time you come on, you owe me a word.
Be
So
ready
you'll
for
get
3
2.
words? Yeah, I needed some preparation for that one.
Excellent.
I'm not good at 3 words. What can I say?
Our guest again has been Corinne Vale from reflectionsenroute.com. And Corinne, if we were going to point people to your best post, that the must-read post on Madagascar, what's that about?
Well, so far I've only written 1 post, so
Well,
there's
that's
not
gonna
a
be the
whole
one
lot of posts. And that really is the general Madagascar guide that does outline what our itineraries were.
Okay.
I put a little bit in there about how I would fly maybe instead of drive and a little bit of advice, but that's our general post. We'll get some good stuff on there pretty soon.
Okay. Well, I'll put a link to that in the show notes and then also in the lyrics of this episode, so if you want to go see that as well. Corinne, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for Madagascar.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
In news of the community, there was a change to our trip to Machu Picchu in Peru in 2019, and we're now going to Africa. More details about that trip will be posted pretty soon, and again, like always, they will go out first to the amateurtraveler.com/trips private Facebook group. You can join that if you want to. And then they will go to the email list, and then they'll be announced on the show. My thanks to people who have done iTunes reviews on Amateur Traveler recently, or Apple Podcast reviews. The first one is from Melody UU. It says, my favorite aspect of the Amateur Traveler podcast, in addition to the warm and approachability of the host, Chris, and guests, is the specificity and level of knowledge Chris brings. His apparent love for learning makes the discussion engaging in the mind as well as spirit/imagination. Whether I am at home in a bite-sized apartment folding laundry with no vacation plans on the horizon, or deciding to take an impromptu trip on the cheapest international flight found on Kayak Explorer this January, Denmark, the Amateur Traveler brings so much joy. As the Stanford study shows, there is biological advantage to being awestruck. This podcast has a knack for the wonder and wander factor. Thanks so much, Melody. And then from Nan, host Chris might be talking about your home city or other place you know well, or a place you have always wanted to see, or some far-flung corner of the world you are not likely ever to visit. But the conversations are always entertaining and informative. Who knew New Caledonia was part of France? I purchased an atlas, an actual book, so I could check out where exactly some of these far-flung corners of the world are. And I have turned to a U.S. road atlas to see what kind of drive I might have to some of the less far-flung areas. These podcasts are well suited to making the time pass faster during a commute or a workout. Thanks so much. And then from Mobile Chick, this one is one of my favorite podcasts. I haven't noticed Chris being condescending to his guests. There's some valuable information in all the podcasts I have listened to, so that I will continue to listen and find more ways to travel on a budget. And thanks, Mobile Chick. And that was a reference to some other less positive reviews that accused me of being a know-it-all, which, you know, hey, it's some truth to that as well. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe.